as I have already told you that I'll be discussing about public policy, and one video is already being posted. Okay, so I'm audible to you. Okay, it's not echoing. Voice is not echoing. Okay, it's fine then. So when we talk about the public policy, you first need to know about what is public and what is policy. We bifurcate the public and the policy. Now you see, when you say public, public has derived its origin from the Latin word called publicus or populus. So there are two words, one is publicus and another one is populus, which gave the origin of the public. So public are supposed to have some common interest, there are commonality of interest, and hence they are defined as the public. Uh, in opposition, in conflict to the private interest. Okay, so private interests are different. There is a commonality of interest among the public. Okay, and when we talk about the policy now, policy, if you dissect again, policy is periodically organized, PO, we actually see, we have that periodically organized, this is called policy, legally induced, okay, and C is calculated ills results. Okay. So we actually see when you talk about the policy, policy stand for periodically organized, legally induced, calculated ills. That's how we understand policy. Now you see the policy what we are talking of is supposed to be public, and it also defines certain course of action of the government, individuals and organization. So definition of public policy will involve the instrument of value preferences in the ideological context, and also people with those value preferences and the institutions. So in any policy you get to find three important components. One is the people, because people with their value preferences have some ideological commitment and take one ideology against another ideology. Then we have already some ideological preferences taken by the people. Those ideological preferences are based on their values they pursue, their principle, and those values are based on also societal ethos. Okay, and then there are institutions who will translate those values, translate those preferences into the policy. So here there is a three actors you see or components which will help to understand the policy. One is the people, so people will definitely be involved in the making of the policies. Okay, people's preferences, people needs, people's desires, people's values, people ideological commitment will be the essence of public policy. Then we have the context. Here I am talking about ideological context. People are there and people set certain ideological contexts. These ideological contexts are based on certain values derived from the society. At last, we have the institutions. So people, context, and institutions. In institutional setup, you get to find some of the tradition also, and some of the institution, like you say, government institutions. You talk about even involvement of legislature, judiciary, three organs of the government, and executive, interest group, racial groups, and other governmental institutions who will actually which will actually translate the values and preferences into the policy, values, preferences, ideologies of the society, which are being framed in the context into policy. So institutionally, we actually get to see that policy is shaped by institution. So it is a institutionally shaped instrument which will go in concomitant, in aligned with the needs and values of the people and interest and preferences of the people. And this policy is supposed to serve the larger interest of the demands of the society and claims of the society. So here again you see these are periodically organized. Here we get to find how policy is actually formulated, implemented, and evaluated. So policy is periodically organized and is legally induced. So when you say legally induced, that means that we already have an apparatus that is called constitution, right? So constitution, that apparatus is there with us, right? And apart from constitution, there are some legal enactments which will also uh, establish that legal context. So, based on which policies are usually shaped, we actually see there is an existing law which will help us to shape another policies because we have to read that law, right? Any kind of enactment uh, which is already available. Constitution is already there because some rights are there, some duties are there that has to go with the values of the societies. When society make a demands, when we talk about the individual demands, we talk about group demand, we talk about interest group demand, pressure group demands, political parties demands, and demands coming from the people through representatives. So here we also see that when we actually find those demands, these are certain values only. These are certain values and also preferred values. You actually see these are preferences. There are many more needs and there are some preferred needs. They will prioritize one set of needs over others. Okay, and there are also values, number of values, but certain values will be prioritized over others. And that is being decided by the society. So, policy is an instrument which will be organized periodically when there are demands and the claims from the society that okay they want change in this issues, that problem, okay, and then that has to be legally induced in the sense that that should go in concomitant and in in align to the context. Context is set by the constitution, and at times context is also set by the very party ideologies, the political parties who are also one agent and actor of policy making. So they will also their ideological commitment also set the context. Their ideological commitment in the sense their economic values. They are going for state-led development. They are going for like liberal economy. So definitely when we talk about two very important economic contexts in India, we have social context, economic context. Broadly, we can say social, economic context. We have governance context, and we have political context. So, when we talk about the economic context, we have two very important phases. One is state-led development. After independence, we focused on state-led development. Right, that set the context that there will be a state-defined developmental approach. There is a planning commissions, so how budget will be allocated and everything is being decided accordingly. So state has a prior role for the development. So after liberalization, the second phase, that saved the economic context, that policies have been liberalized, there is a free flow of you see trade, and there are more privatization, right? We talk about free flow of people, free flow of ideas, free flow of production, free flow of people, right? So that has happened after liberalization, and that too in alignment with globalization. So globalization, the context is globalization, context will be liberalization. Context, economic context here I am talking of. Okay, context will be the state-led development. So these are the contexts will definitely influence the whole policy process, policy making process. So when we talk about this ideological or political context, that is ideological commitment of the ruler. Suppose right is government and this right is right-wing populism we are talking of. Right, centrist government, leftist government. So they do have some ideological preference and that will set the context, policy context. And that context will be aligned to legally induced context like constitutional values, constitutional that some we talk about preferences. We talk values only. Those are rights, duties, etc. Various legal enactments are there, various other laws. Huh. So that will go along with those legally induced contracts. And then we have calculated ills. When you talk about the calculated ills, in the sense, in its policies, benefits and costs are always associated and it will be calculated. So you see that policy or comes from or a policy is derived from a problem or an issue. So when we talk about the policy formulation, there are certain stages. We talk about policy formulation and implementation, but there are some stages. And when it come across those stages, so we see the very first stage is the identification of the problem. So you need to identify the problem and publicize the problem. Okay, this is the problem. You identify so many problems we have encountered in our day-to-day life. So identify the problem, you publicize the problem, and then what you are supposed to do, make it an agenda. Make it an agenda means you are supposed to have certain alternative along with the problem to make it an agenda. Then we talk about the policy formulations. You devise a proposal. Okay, you devise a proposal out of the alternative. So once you make it an agenda through publicity, you understand the problem. Okay, there is a problem, scope of the problem, like how it has affected the people. There are different way to understand a problem and identify a problem. So that's what I have already discussed in one video. So when you identify a problem, you will identify a problem on the basis of the scope. Scope in the sense how many people are being affected by that particular problem. Okay, then identify a problem on the basis of the time and the resources. When you say the time in the sense of for how long that problem has affected the people, how long standing the problem is, for how long, 2 years, 3 years, for last 10 years, for 20 years, how long the problem has affected the people. Then the resources, how much resources we have at stake, and what is at stake, who will be involved in the implementations, and how much resources, in the sense the money, monetary resources, human resources, logistics, technologies which will be required, how much resources we have at stake. Okay, which is important. Then intensity, on the basis of intensity also you will identify the problem. That is the very first of identification of the problem and the first stage of policy formulations. And you see that is the next stage is implementation and then evaluation. So first is identification of the problem on the basis of scope, intensity, time, and resources. Intensity in the sense that how important that problem is. First is the scope, how many people are affected, how important that problem is for you. Regular basis you have encountered so many problems, but what makes a non-issue an issue? That is very important to identify. Okay, what makes it a problem that we need to invest time, interest, resources, etc. So intensity is very important. Okay, on that basis you will identify the policy. So, that problem for policy formulations. Then, in the next stage, we will actually go for setting the agenda. Here, you will actually, as a media uh, person, so you will try to find out media logic, and also you call it the political logic. Here, when you are talking about the agenda, we also have mediatization of politics. Have you heard about mediatization of politics? This is very, very important. That might also frame another question altogether. Apart from the policy context, we need to know about mediatization of the politics. We talk about mediatization of the culture, mediatization of leisure, mediatization of our everyday rules. What does that mean, mediatization? Mediatization is basically publicity given by media to our day-to-day life, publicity given by media to the culture and heritage, to the political actors. That's what mediatization of the politics. And now you see, not mediatization of the politics, that's what mediatization is all about. But when you talk about the mediatization of politics, that it involves the time that media um, that is gave to the issues and concerns of political figures, political actors, and also the leaders. Okay, so their issues, their concern, their opinion are being disseminated with the help of the media. That's what mediatized, or is a mediatization of the politics. Their values are being mediatized. Their opinion are being mediatized. So here you see that when you talk about the agenda setting and we talk about publicizing the problem, so here there are certain stages, publicizing the problem, it involves in a very first stage. When we identify the problem, you actually get to see the source of the information. Source of information may be, when you see, may be interpersonal, right? Source of information may be interpersonal. Source of information may be, you see, that peer group. That is what interpersonal source of information, through actions, so interactions you will learn. And then one source of information may be media. Okay, so you will not be influenced by media logic unless and until you have an exposure to the media. If you do not have, you all know about that, right? If you do not have the exposure to the media, you will not be influenced by the media logic. So there is a media logic. Media logic is actually formed by the format, content. We have actually discussed about it in the very first semester about information literacy, and also all the format, content, style of delivery define the media logic. Okay, so there is a typical format. So even if you have some personal stories, some narrations, some content that has to be fit into that particular style, particular format. Without that format, you won't find any kind of media logic. Right, now you see that here, when we talk about the setting of the agenda and publicizing the problem, publicizing the agenda, here we see that whether problem is mediatized, information is mediatized. We talk about problem, we can consider it as any information is mediatized. So use of media as a source or use of interpersonal communication as a source. How much it is mediatized means media coverage of that particular issue, or whether it is still in the public domain, it is not being discussed, but it is problem is there, it is identified at interpersonal level, at group level, at civil society level, it is being identified. But you see, it is not mediatized because source of information is not the media. Source of information is the public. Source of information means that problem is discussed among people, but media hasn't taken any kind of interest to disseminate that information. And then, in the second aspect of the mediatization and publicizing or making the agenda, is more about the gradual adaptation of media by the political actors. Now, you say once it is mediatized, okay, a problem is being published by the media, it is also very, very important whether media is working. You also know that media is working independently of any control or not. That is a second aspect of mediatization. These are certain aspects also when I tell you how will you define and conceptualize mediatization of politics even, or that is a separate question maybe. But I'm also giving you a brief in align to public policy. Okay, so when we are talking about that, how much media is controlled by the government, how much media is controlled by that is what the state system, political system, is what will define the media logic. First is source of media as in the very four aspects are there in mediatization. First aspect, which is the source of information. Second is whether media is independently working without being influenced by the government. Third is that whether government has adopted media or not. And fourth is whether government has adopted media. Now you say adaptation and adaptation. These are two very important distinctions. One is government is adapting media. Once I found that issue has been discussed already, and one media, suppose government has found that there are media is working independently. Especially what happened when there is a war, media house will not work independently. So you won't get to find any kind of media logic involved in times of war, in kind of certain situation, in any context. When there is a wartime context, your context may be economic, context may be political. War is also economic and political context, mix of economic political context, but it is also predominant by the war context. So your media logic will be influenced by the political logic because media can't work independently of its own format. by its own format. It cannot be dictated by format and the style. So it has to be influenced by the political actors' opinions, rule, their behavior, their say. Okay, so it's their values. Okay, that's so what that you see that when media is influenced by the political actors, then we see political actors will actually adapt to media. They are starting how much influence that media is having on the political actors. Okay, so that is related to adaptation of the media. That is another third aspect of the media logic, mediatization. So, how much are you getting what I'm saying? How much a political actor is influenced by the media style format? Now you say this government is very much adapted to the media format, media styles because of permanent campaign, political campaign, right? And next is the adoption of that logic. Adoption in the sense that in adoption of the media, you get to see there is a continuum equilibrium between government and the media. So government will not publish any like they will publish, they will make use of all the media format and the style, and also you see that public will sorry that media will also make use media will also take each and every permission from the government to publicize something. And that's how we actually see in the second the way agenda is being set through mediatization. So through publicity, you can set the agenda, and here, while setting the agenda, you also incorporate the values of the political actors, opinion of the political actors. And then third is the formulation of the policy. Policy formulations, you get to find different actors like we in the very first class we discuss about these interest groups, right? And pressure groups, they work independently, they do have their own share of demands and the claims. And we have political parties, they have their manifestos and the values, and they will also share their values and the preferences through manifestos. And so everything, all these actors will come together in the policy formulation stage, and they will have different alternative proposals. Okay, and the best proposal will be selected. Like you said, a proposal supported by the majority will be selected. So we have a policy formulation, and formulation will go with the legitimization. In policy legitimization, you will have the support from the public and different interest group and different actors. That is another fourth phase. And then we have implementation. You will implement the policy, and last is the evaluation, policy evaluation. So when we are talking about this policy, how policies are organized, as I have said, is periodically organized documents, right? And legally induced and calculated aims are there. So here you see involvement of lot many actors, and in framing an issue, a course of action. You say it's a process actually. Policy making is a process. This is not an end. It is a process because it involves that course of action, right? Course of action of or certain activities of the people, of the government, of the interest group, of the legislature, judiciary, and executive, because admin and bureaucrats, you see. That course of action it will involve, and it actually it is also known as authoritative allocation of the values. So outcome basically is when you talk about making of the policy, that is basically authoritative allocation of the values. So lot of values have been come, and you have actually made the policy, right? So that input is being made and policy is framed, and once policy is framed, that is actually equated to authoritative allocation of the values. You are not going to take only one values. Policy is multi-directional, hence. So policy is not single directional. If you are talking about one scheme, if you discuss about one government scheme, you say any government scheme, even Ayushman Bharat, that is also multi-directional. Okay, any government scheme you can come up. So you see any kind of that is not equal. That is a scheme. But when you say any policies, these are also equivalent to policies. So any policies are multi-directional, serving different cluster of the people and serving two, three goals at a time, not only one's goal. And when you are talking about the goal, better you identify goal with the sustainable development goals nowadays. Okay, SDG. Hence, it is important to understand how the policy is formulated. Then we actually see that what is important is some of the approaches. Okay, so I will not be go that detail about approaches because I prefer you to write a short note only. So you don't have to go that detail. Okay, short note on policy and public policy. Okay, so for that you need to know the very concept of public policy, how policy is formulated, who are the actors involved in the policy. Like that way you can write some, like you can put some highlights. Okay, and making things easier for the whole of the class. Okay, not I'm not thinking only a particular set of students. So if I give you a very open question, it will be easier for everyone to write instead of simply asking you certain approaches to make the policy. But I'm telling you there are certain approaches to make the policy, and those approaches are, like we can call it theory also, some framework. We have the institutional approach to understand the policy. We have also ethical elite approach to understand the policy. We have the group approach to understand the policy, and there is also public choice approach to understand, a rational optimal approach to understand the polity, rationality approach, and also normative optimal approach to understand the polity. So institutional approach will actually tell you that there are institutions in the society who will make the policies. Legislature is there, so definitely legislature will pull down the important issues from the society and place it in the parliament, and which can be open for discussions, and based on which we have policies. There are different committees in the legislature, so legislature will definitely play a role in terms of making the policies. So here you actually study the policy at institutional level, how legislature is involved in making one policies. Okay, and what is the role of executive, how executive is executing that policy, and is there any judicial review of that policy. So judiciary is a crucial part of the policy making because they have a role in reviewing the policy. Okay, so like that way you can actually see that we have certain policies, and which are institution, which you can study from institutional point of view. It is all about how we study the policy. Take any policy, so you can study the origin of the policy, how policy is formulated, how policy is adjusted, how it is even reformulated, what are the feedback about the policy, and how far it is being implemented. Okay, and you can evaluate the policy, you can monitor the progress and all. So like that way you can study a policy. And there are certain approaches. This approach will help you to understand, or at least to narrow down uh, the analysis of the policy. So one is institutional approach. You actually study the role of the institution in formulating the policies and how they are basically formulating the policies. That's one. Second is the elitist approach. When you talk about elitist approach, as the elite theory said, we have already discussed about the elite theory, that there is a circulation of the elite in the political system, elite, and there is also a consensus between the elite, and there is always one elite group replaced by another elite. Okay, and the non-elite will gain precedence when they give support to the elite. So the opinion of the non-elite will not be taken into consideration if they will not give support to the elite. Okay, so here also certain values and preferences of elites are taken into consideration. So you find out certain policies which are actually meant for one section of the people. Then we can actually understand where is the middle class benefit of the middle class, or where is the benefit of the poor class. So we started from elitist theory. Okay, So like that way it depends upon the nature of the policies. Okay, then we have group theory at the same time. So certain policies, as we can see that now, when we discuss about the context of policy making, we have the economic context, we have political context, right? We have governmental context. Huh. So economic context is already set, like political ideological context is also set. Here, when we talk about the group, uh, group is basically talking about the interest group here when there are compromises, right? In one class, in the last in media management class, I have taught you about decision making. So here you have different approaches. No? So we also discuss about Simon's bounded rationality. That is actually a very political and managerial approach to understand the policy. Here also we will get that rationality approach to understand the politics when there is intellectual activity, design activity, and implementation activity. Okay, so here in group activity, it is all about compromising the claims and the demands. So it is about reconciliation. So there are numerous demands. However, that you actually see the flow of negotiations among the group in terms of the demands, what one group has negotiated, how far they have negotiated, and which claim has got the precedence over the others and become a predominant one. Hmm. And like that way, you can actually use that approach to study very briefly. I'm telling you because you don't have to go that detail about. Okay, so we're using the group approach. What you can actually study the involvement of interest groups, their stake in one particular policy. Now you see when there is a context, neoliberal context. In neoliberal context, civil society has got the precedence to all the policy decisions. Initially, there was state-led development, so all developmental policies were decided by the state, and the approach was also a bit top-down. The center will decide how much state people should have at different level. Okay, so people, so they want to control the people. So we also need feedback from the people on this very line. But there is a control from the government. But when we talk about now neoliberal approach, civil society will play very strong role because they have assumed certain responsibilities of the society, and hence. When we talk about role of civil society, they do have an activated opinion. As I have already told you, activated opinion will have a stake on the policy. More than mass opinion. Mass opinion will have a stake on any kind of decision related to war. In war, we actually have, say, more than activated opinion, we go for mass opinion now. And mass opinion is also built on mediatization of the politics. Right. So here we are talking about war, like wartime decisions. It is also you need to understand about the mediatization of the politics. Right. Here you actually see in wartime, this is media is influenced by the political logic. Right. They do not rely, as I have been already reiterating the fact that they will not rely on any kind of music format, style, content. Content will be disseminated by the government. Whatever is being disseminated by the government, they will rely to establish the solidarity among the people. So mass opinion will, like take over the activated opinion during wartime. But in other situation, other contexts, so activated opinion will always take precedence. So here, civil society will always take a role. When you understand the group approach to understand the politics, you actually understand the claims that activated opinion coming from different groups, their demands and the claims, and the kind of negotiation which are being made, how much it is compromised, how far certain values are being compromised, and what is being taken at what stake, the resources, time involved, intensity of the problem, everything you are supposed to study, and that too from the angles of those actors, so different groups. Okay, and then you study the whole negotiation process basically, and how it has helped us to authoritative allocation of values and taking a decision. Huh. So then we talk about the um, group, and we talk about the rationality approach. It's see when you talk about the rationality approach, it's very difficult to Thomas Dye. You perhaps he is also public policy specialist. So he has. mentioned that it's very difficult for policymaker to take a rational decision, pure rational decision, because of certain hurdles. What might be the hurdles of hurdles policymakers face, or hurdles in front of policymakers to make a rational decision? Well,
So I feel it would be difficult to encompass every interest of every community or every group in order to formulate that.
yeah, there are a lot of confrontations from different groups, right? And also, many a time we see that there are contending claims, and there is no sync of those claims. So it's very difficult to accommodate all the claims into one particular policy, right? So that might be one hurdle. Another hurdle may be this: you can take bureaucratic hurdles. Bureaucracy itself, bureaucratic support may not be received. You see, and also there are that is inertia, bureaucratic inertia. They are not going to, yeah, many people usually face that bureaucratic inertia, and also bureaucratic hurdles because of this paperwork. They will keep you go from this desk to other desk and to other desk, so making your life very tangled. Okay, so bureaucratic hurdle is also there. Another one is highly centralized, like setup and the hierarchy, which will also at times, you see, become a hurdles and obstruction of policy making when there is too much centrality of approaches. Okay, and then when we see other hurdles, like we see that lack of administrative motivation, that is also another hurdle. Administration is not willing to help people. Okay, that is also another hurdles in terms of, like, execution of the policy and implementation of the policy. Then we actually see that financial lack of financial resources is a very important, and poor policy formulation is another hurdle, because policy design is very poor. The way it is designed is poor. That might be one hurdles, and also lack of financial resources, very important hurdle we get to find, right? So we see that you see so many hurdles are there, because of which it's very difficult to adopt some rational decision. Okay, and but rationality approach has actually focused upon you see intelligent activity, design activity, and implementation activity. So, as it is very difficult to take rational decision, you will actually, based on the choice, based on the priority, you will decide the course of action. Intelligent activity involves deciding the course of action based upon select values and select preferences, and how strongly we design the proposal and how we implement. So simply it focuses on the intellectual design and implementation activities. Okay. So and when you talk about this intellectual activity, it is all about your thinking process here. But it is also aligned to, let me tell you, that norm, that is, this is called normative optimal approach. So first we see that in rationality model, it is also said they have tried to find out that consequences of any new kind of policies will be very heavy, because at times lot of uncertainties will be involved. So when you actually make an entirely new policy, so you'll be uncertain about the consequences of the policy. Hence, a rationality approach involves certain intelligence in terms of choosing the previous policy. Based on the previous policy, they will, what they will do, they will choose the best. So you tend to find that there is a lack of motivation to come up with a new policy framework altogether. But these are also at times hurdles. You see, we talk about intelligence, but we rely more on the previous policies because of the uncertainty, avoidance of consequences of the new policy. You never know new policies, the kind of hurdle new policy come up. So we better rely on the same formula, same format. So that's, you said, that rationality. But here this is not a pure rationality. Okay, so this is basically an optimal, you see. this is called normative optimal rationality. Optimal in the sense it is normative. This becomes a norm, and optimal in the sense that you see that is optimal, that is good for all perhaps, and it will improve that goal, optimal goal, which is also derived from different claims, and over the years it is thought that it will be improved, situation will be improved. We have taken the same policy framework, and we have also um, we are going to work on the same policy framework. There will be little revision of it. We will not come up with any new policy framework, but over the years there will be improvement in this policy because our design is different and the way we are going to implement will be different. So that will be a rationality and in align with normative optimal model of policy making.
So basically, normative optimal approach takes previous policies
Yeah.
in order to make new.
Yeah, actually, that is also you said, yeah, previous policies, but that is it. It is also said that that is a part of you see rationality approach, normative optimal approach. But basically, a normative optimal approach invests upon the societal norms and something optimal, which derive out of extrapolation of different goals in the society. Some optimal goals which will benefit all, which will bring welfare for all, okay, and then they will try to improve upon that goals. But whether those are rationally chosen, whether those are not, that is not highlighted because they always have a problem with the rationality. But when you talk about the rationality, rationality also, actually rational approach avoid that uncertainty of consequences of new policy, and hence rationality model focuses upon the previous policies. But design will be different, implementation will be different. Okay. Then we have a public choice model. In public choice model, you actually see that individuals are considered. Individuals are considered as a economic person. When we talk about economic man, we have actually found about Herbert Simon, economic man. Economic man is driven by the self-interest. So that approach has said that politicians will not go for any kind of altruism. Politician is also driven by the self-interest. So when you are talking about political approach, in political approach you are supposed to find only the national interest and self-interest. National interest equivalent to statesmanship. So politicians will always give precedence over his statesmanship and even national interest, than any kind of altruism. And then we also have another understanding is that that is also self-interest, that is an economic man. And another one is here again rational man, economic man and the rational man. And the rational man will always uh, provide some individual model which will be a model for a group or an organization. So, what we understand by it is that we see that a rational man will take certain decisions for his own interest, for fulfillment of his goal, and that model can be implicated in organization level and at national level. Okay, so that is also public choice is that, so whatever organization is doing, so any kind of you see even this relation between the countries can be based on individual optimum model. These are the relationship that individual have, right, with each other. Sometimes one rational man taking a decision to force a relation, promote a relation with another group. So he actually establishes a model which will be replicated at a policy level. Okay. So you're an economic man and a rational man. That's what is given precedence over the public choice. Okay. Like that way you can actually understand certain policies, you can analyze certain policies. There are policies, different policies. We have regulatory policies, we have distributive policies, we have redistributive policies. So when you talk about regulatory policies, we have to have some understanding about regulatory agencies. Like we have SEBI, Security and Exchange Board of India. We have TRAI, that Telecommunication Regulatory Authority of India. You have Reserve Bank of India. These are regulatory bodies, and they make some policies which have authoritative binding upon the society or the individual. Means that will be as policies which they will be take will control the individual, some their activities. So authoritatively those regulation will be binding upon by individual and on individual and the societies. Suppose there are also some competitive, let me tell you, protective regulatory policies, and there are some competitive regulatory policies. In terms of protective regulatory policies, state role is to protect the individual from any kind of individual and the society and people from individual activity of private actors. Suppose you can actually talk about state rule and policy related to vehicle pollution. That is an individual activity of one person and individual activity of any private being, not a person, private being. So state role is to protect the individual and society and the people from the private activity of or from a private activity of a bill. Okay, then we have a competitive policy. When you say competitive policies are referring to some of the goods and the services which are made available by government to certain specific you see section of group agencies. Okay, and because of their competitive nature, and they are selected from the large section of the group, like groups, in a sense that basically here you talk about offering an allocation of goods and the services to the groups which are competitively selected from the society, and groups and services to the deliverers, you might say. Here not of people, groups and services to the deliverers who will be competitively selected from the society. Now we talk about there are many deliverers in the society. Even all private agencies are deliverers, but there are certain agencies which have got the leverage and the privilege to have the spectrum allocation. So that is a competitive policy. Policies related to spectrum allocation and all. Then we have distributive policy. Distributive policies are political compulsion. You see, government are supposed to make distributive policies like subsidies available to farmers, subsidies available to some student. Uh, so that distributive policy is a political compulsion which is supposed to be appropriated with the budget. Then we have redistributive policies, which are also very, very important. So when we talk about the redistributive policies, we have certain compensation policies and ethical policies. When you talk about the compensation policies, sorry, capitalization policies, not capitalization. Capitalization policies are not welfare oriented like the distributive policies. Okay, so capitalization policies are supposed to you see, increase the productive asset of one agency. Okay, when you talk about the capitalization policy, productive asset of one agency, any kind of private subsidy that is being got is a kind of like a capitalization. Private subsidy. I'm not talking about government giving subsidy to group of farmers. Okay, that is a compulsion, political compulsion. Any kind of private subsidy, they provide kind of benefits. Not that they can't provide any kind of like that is discount they are giving. So these are related to capitalization to increase the productive asset of that agency. Okay, Then we have some of the and even government giving subsidy to private being. When government giving subsidy to private organization and the institution is also related to capitalization, because government giving subsidy to certain private sector to establish industry in rural areas, okay, and establish industry in the remotest part of the areas, just because those areas are not mainstreamed. Right, those areas are not mainstream, and hence government is giving subsidy to private. You go to that area, you will find the lucrative business in that area. So that is a kind of is the capitalization policy, because through that policy government will increase the productive asset. Okay, so like that we can have, as we are talking about government policy, market policy, so this will be a very good example that government will giving subsidy to private sectors. Then we have ethical policies. When you talk about ethical policies, these are some of the practices that government have on moral issues, issues related to abortion even. That policy has been taken to abortion. So it is legally permitted, but in USA also it is legally permitted. But at the same time, uh, morally, there might be some kind of apprehension regarding that abortion. But okay, 3 months during the trimester, that abortion can be possible that way. That was a kind of ethical policy. But the practice that government has already allowed on moral issues. Okay, that is ethical policies. So like that way, we have redistribution policy divided into capitalization and ethical policies, distribution policies which are equivalent to political compulsion, and the first one is regulatory policies. Okay, regulatory policies like we have the competitive regulatory policy and protective regulatory policies. Okay, so it's raining also. Okay. Okay, I think this is enough for understanding public policy. Okay. Regarding the political journalism, should I also discuss a bit about political journalism? Maybe in the next class, I would like to take one class, political journalism. And here, let me tell you that as this policy is very important. At least understanding the concept, understanding the types of policies, you can find out different types of policies now. Okay, you can make a case study on regulatory policies, on distributive policies. Okay, so find some of the policy, and then you understand how policies are formulated. So, as I have already discussed, the states, identifications, then agenda setting, then policy formulation, then your legitimation, that means gaining the support, then implementation and evaluation, each stage, and the actors in each stage, okay, which are very important. And you can also mention a little about the approaches to study different policies, how you will study the policies. Okay, if you wish to, but I am not going to give you a very long question for it. Then one more thing, in one class we have discussed about, remember, um, Indo-Pak relations. This is very important from recent turmoil that we are experiencing. Okay, so so you need to actually know about these three wars. So what when you talk about these various contentions, okay, and also we talk about uh, the relation between the two, how it has evolved over the time. So you need to reflect upon the three war. Basically, the first, that run of Kutch war. So you study about that war, run of Kutch. I have already discussed about the war, right? And the issues basically. It's all about this Kashmir issues. Okay, it's very important. And then about the second 1971 war, and the third Kargil War. And there are different airstrike over the years. I have also shared uh, a text, I think. Some, yeah.
And
One
that would
article is being shared.
and
Okay.
that would include the surgical strike and
Yeah, a
other.
lot of surgical strike. And you see, earlier also we have many more strikes. Government had to launch. And here you see the compulsion of Indian government. And don't afraid to give opinion in the answer script. Okay, because this is not going to be in the public forum. So you give your opinion in the answer script regarding the airstrike and many a time, and also government stake. So many a time what happened that we actually we look things different way. Now also you see that it's very difficult to give your opinion because you do not know. But if you look into the situation, you see, you actually do not know who were the terrorists. We say that they have come from the Pakistan, and there is also a history to always take them as a deceiver. There is a history because right from the very beginning, right from 1947, all the violence, whatever violence, and also see intrusion coming from the Pakistan made us believe. Um, that okay they will be the aggression, they should be the aggression. But you see the aid Pakistan received from the US and also the China is a major concern for India because US and China didn't stop sending the aid for arms and ammunition build-up for Pakistan. Instead of establishing a liberal democracy, they are simply sending these arms ammunition, aiding, assisting, right? And you also see that trying to create a kind of that what military province that across South Asia by providing that arm assistance. Right. So you never know whose policy is it, but time and again we have actually experienced that aggression coming from the Pakistan only. Okay, and how to react? So we have to react. Otherwise, you see that we will also be a country of no consequences, and it will at the same time give them somehow is encouragement to commit more terrorist activities. Okay, and in one thing yesterday I also read a report by one journalist, senior journalist, reporting for Conflict and Peace. It's very difficult even to say that look for peace in this kind of situation. It is not what he said. I feel that it's very difficult. At times, I feel that say no to war. I'll say that, okay, you simply say no to war because that's what my mind says. Say no to war. But again, I'll say that what happened, there is a history. What happened in the history, what happened earlier, what happened during 1965, there are intrusions. You actually know about the Ran of Kuch. Ran is an area that is also included in a Kuchrin, that is a native. Uh, Around 3,500 kilometers away from the 24th parallel. And Pakistan demanded that that Ran area is a part of that Sindh province. And again, they have included. So, and that time also Pakistan got this help from US as well as China. So China and the US have been helping Pakistan to develop this military arsenal. So you see the policy of uh, USA, and if you look into the nationalism of the USA, they always look for establishing a liberal democracy in the countries through even humanitarian interventions. But here they are actually encouraging the militarism at the same time through providing that like military build-up. They're helping them building that military arsenal. No, so situation at one level is very difficult to understand. So we can have full support with the government, no doubt, because we can sing it and go in solidarity. But as I have already told you that there are certain sentiment which are there. So you analyze the situation. There are certain sentiment. If you actually know the East Pakistan and the West Pakistan, the condition because of which it was divided. Okay, and now Pakistan also claimed that actually the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, you see that took advantage of that civil war, but that was not the case. It was not. That was their belief. Took advantage of the civil war between East Pakistan and West Pakistan. But at the same time, you see that majority of Muslims are there in the East Pakistan and Kanpur was there in the West Pakistan. And when Ayami League, you know about the Ayami League, and Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was the leader of the Ayami League. So Ayami League actually happened to win 160 seats out of 300 seats in the Pakistan Legislative Assembly. That was the elections. Because initially the control, right from the very beginning, from independence to 1970s, control was uh, uh, gained by West Pakistan. Pakistani only. So all the political activities are conducted in the West Pakistans. So we have a East Pakistan, but both these communities are marked by religion only. They are integrated only this faith, religious faith. Okay. And then we actually see that when Awami League happened to win the majority, and that was not even been considered by then you see I think Ayub Khan was the president during that time. So was not even considered by the Ayub Khan, and because of which you actually see there was a massive massacre happened. It was not being considered. Then we have seen that Bangladeshi youth has formed this Mukti Bahini force, and that was also alleged by the Pakistan that it happened because of India. India has sent Indian troop in the form of Mukti Bahini. It was not the case. Okay, but there is a massacre from West Pakistan to East Pakistan, and at the same time, we get to find what happened is that uh, there is a number of millions of refugees arrived in India. Millions of refugees arrived in India, and India cannot be a silent spectator, and India had to intervene. Then, when there is a refugee problem came up in the year 1971, it happened because of the massacre that was committed by West Pakistan on East Pakistan. And there is a massive intruders, we also say influx of people, refugees into the Indian territory. Okay, and that led Prime Minister to take action first to give a diplomatic pressure to USA as well as other big power to stop the massacre and also stop sending the arms and munitions to the Pakistan. But USA didn't agree. They said that we will be sending. How they use it, that done. Okay, so in that situation, India had to exert that war. So following that war, we see 1970 war. We also have this Simla Accord. You need to know about Simla Accord. Prior to Simla Accord, we also have a Tescan Accord, which is important. Tescan Accord came into effect because of the involvement of, you see, his name was Kozygin. Kozygin was the premier of Soviet Union, and when Pakistan said that Soviet Union or USSR is also encouraging the expansionist activities of India, then Soviet USSR has tried to win Pakistan, saying that no, it is whatever is happening is all because of the imperialist power like USA. So you see, the Cold War is always there. One is imperialism, one is communism. One is saying that it's happening because of communism. India is supporting communism. Pakistan is saying when they are looking for aid from West and USSR, uh, and also Soviet Union saying that it's all because happening from imperialism. But that was a Cold War that did not get any kind of realistic portrayal. But in the inside of the Cold War, you actually get to see that a kind of we see that military build up or base that USA have already made is very dangerous at the same time. And Indian naval, during 1971 war also, US has already came and you see US fleet, naval fleet has already found in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah,
Try to, yeah, okay,
let
then.
me take.
Yes, yes. Okay, so I'm just ending it.